Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm back talking about a camera that was just announced last week at the time of this recording. Now, there's not a lot of reviews on YouTube for this camera yet. I've been using it for the past few days, so I thought I'd give you some insights on what I think the camera's like to use, the pros, the cons, and my overall thoughts. Here it is, the all-new Leica SL2-S. Like always, I want to thank Leica Singapore for helping me with this review. I've only had it for a few days. Having said that, these are my thoughts and my thoughts only. Let's talk about the camera. Design, simply put, it's the same as the SL2. The only difference you're going to notice is that bold Leica lettering on the front here is all black. Now, it's not like they removed it. It's actually a black lacquer paint inside of it. It's a subtle touch, but it's that subtle touch that gives it sort of this dark night look, except for that red Leica dot right there. So, you know, a lot of shooters out there, if you're not in the most safest of terrains, you're usually taping up your Leica cameras so you don't show the red dot, you don't show the Leica lettering. Leica sort of helped you along the way so you can use a little bit less tape, but I just love the whole stealthy look of it overall because when you take the camera out and you shoot with it, it's this matte black that just doesn't scream anything. When you're shooting it on the streets, no one really notices unless you use this massive 50 summilux lens. But if you use anything smaller like the 50 summicron, 35 summicron, or even the Sigma lenses, this is almost undetectable. Almost. But nonetheless, that's the only difference from the SL2 and the SL2S. But it's about what is inside of this camera that is the big difference. Of course, the sensor. No longer do we have that 47 megapixel sensor in it. We now have a 24.6 BSI CMOS sensor, backside illuminated sensor. Now, I'm not going to go into all the technicalities of this sensor. I'm just going to, layman's terms, it's much better in low light situations. You don't have to crank up your ISO as high, and your image quality is much better. And that's something that you're going to see later on in this review when we go into Lightroom. I'll show you some sample images. But this sensor is the star of this camera. Of course, your ISO performance is better with this as well, from 50 up to 100,000. Now, no one's going to be able to shoot at 100,000, but even at 50,000 ISO, you might find some of your images are usable, not probably for prints or for, professional publications, but social media and things like that. No issues at all. But also, Leica's touting this as a 2-in-1 camera. Now, the SL2 was essentially the same thing, 5.9K video recording in it. You have 10-bit 422, you could record internally, externally, all that fun stuff. The same is pretty much here, except you're not getting 5.9K. You're getting up to 4K 60, but you got to record externally to like an Atomos Ninja 5 or an external monitor or external recorder for that matter. But 4K 30, you can shoot an L-Log if you want. You have LUTs in there, classic or natural, that you can give a preview of the LUTs. You can also download them from Leica's website and then input them into your editing software. So if you want to shoot in log, you can do that. So there's a lot of great things with this camera. Also, unlimited recording. There's no longer a 30-minute or 29-minute recording time limit on it. No, unlimited recording as long as the battery lasts and your SD runs out. That is a very welcomed addition. So Leica is sort of getting more into that videography space with this camera. And a lot of people are saying, but isn't this, Bobby, isn't this like a Lumix S5, but just a lot more expensive? And I'm going to say no, it's more like an S1, but more expensive, because you have the same EVF as you have on the SL2, it's the 5.76 million dot EVF. You have the same display in the back of this camera. There's no handicapping in this camera besides the sensor, which is not a handicap for that matter, it's just lower megapixels and different in terms of specs, in terms of video recording. So to me, it's more like an S1 versus an S1R versus calling it an S5 rebadged as a Leica SL2S. That to me is the wrong thing. And people are asking this question, is the camera smaller? No, it is exactly the same size. You are paying a premium for this camera. Leica is giving you premium build quality through and through. Now, also one of the things about this camera that I noticed, a couple of differences, of course, is the color tones coming out of this sensor, and of course the Maestro 3 processor. Now with the SL2, it was, some people liked it and didn't like it. It had somewhat of an HDR look to your image, very contrasty, sometimes difficult to edit. With the SL2S, the color is a little bit nicer. It's a little bit more smoother, more cinematic. It's much easier to edit. Now, people will say, well, it's because it's a 24.6 megapixel sensor versus 47. I disagree. I think Leica has tuned the color science a little bit more into this camera than the SL2. Maybe they'll put this in a future update for the SL2. We don't know, but I really like the colors coming out of this. And the colors for video, as you'll see in just a bit, are also really fantastic as well. If you want to shoot just straight out of camera, if you want to shoot an L-log and put a LUT to it, you're going to notice that the video quality is really good out of this SL2S. Besides that, I mean, battery life, you get up to 510 shots for photography out there. So there's a little bit of an improvement on that. I would definitely recommend getting 2 batteries, though. If you're going to take this on a trip with you or for any work assignment, definitely have 2 batteries. You can charge this by USB-C, but if you're going to be using it and charging at the same time, it depends on your wattage. So I would say just carry 2 batteries to be safe with you. But let's talk about one of the elephants in the room, autofocus, right? Because when the SL2 came out to market, the autofocusing was okay. You know what I mean? It wasn't fantastic. And we sort of saw the same autofocusing from the S1, the S1R, and the S1H when they first launched as we saw in the SL2. Now, subsequently, Panasonic did update those cameras at the end of November. Leica has not updated the SL2 as of yet. They're saying in the first half of 2021. I can tell you that the SL2S performs much better than the SL2 in terms of autofocusing. As a matter of fact, we're shooting on an S1H right now, and this autofocusing is very comparable to the S1H, the S1R, and the S1 in terms of that update. So it's something that I think users out there who wanted better autofocusing, guys, you're gonna really like this. The tracking is improved, the face recognition is improved, the speed at which it autofocuses is faster. You can use multi-field now, and it's good. It's good. You don't have to stick with spot or field in the focusing points. You can actually move around. Tracking sticks on like glue. I mean, I got a couple of shots I took of people riding a motorcycle or a car going down the street, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. But of course, it depends how fast your burst mode's gonna be. Now, if you're gonna go at the 25 frames per second, as this camera can do in DNG, it's single autofocus, not continuous autofocus. So that might be a little bit of a hindrance, but if you just drop it down a little bit, you can have continuous autofocus, and you're gonna be very happy with the performance coming out of this camera. Also, let's talk about tethering for Capture One, because this is a question that I got out there. Is it really good? It's great. It's seamless. You know, plug it in, start a new session, and you're good to go. High burst mode, no issues at all. Single, nothing. Correct your images. Everything else coming out of the camera is corrected. It's fantastic. This is a welcome addition. I'm glad Leica finally has partnered with Capture One on this, because while you could tether to Lightroom before, I think Capture One is a much better software in terms of tethering, and it's what a lot of professionals use out there. And I think when you're processing your images in Capture One, other reviewers have said this, other photographers have said this, you do see the image looking a little bit better out of Capture One. Just wish Capture One would make a mobile version so we could use it on an iPad or on our smartphone and still get that same kind of performance. So that is essentially the SL2S in a nutshell. They call S's for speed, mind you. Faster in terms of frames per second, 25 frames versus I think 20 plus on the SL2. You've got really good video recording, unlimited capabilities on this. You've got faster autofocusing system on this. The buffering speed is even better on this camera now as well, because one of the things with the SL2, you're shooting at 47 megapixels in DNG, that camera's buffering wasn't really good. You could use the fastest UHS-2 cards, which I'm using, the Sony Tough cards, and I had to wait. And that wasn't good, especially if I wanted to shoot fast action. Not the case with this. Shooting in DNG or JPEG, I can still play my images back pretty much right away. Of course, it's smaller files, that's part of it. But I also think that Leica has improved the buffering to give you 4 gigabytes of buffering inside of this camera. But nonetheless, let's show you some sample footage right now coming out of the SL2S. All right, now we're testing Cine 4K in L-Log at 422 10-bit, 4K 23.98 frames per second, or 24 for you guys out there. And we're gonna test the autofocusing. Now, we are in a car park now because it was starting to pour rain outside, and I gotta get this camera back to Leica within an hour. So, this is not the optimal place to do a review, but it is what it is. And this is gonna give you more of a real world scenario with fluorescent lighting, not the optimal lighting conditions, being in a car park. Bryce is gonna track me a little bit as I walk around here with face and body detection to see how this camera performs. Now, I am in a darker situation right now. And of course, if I do step back a little bit, if we walk this way, how will it capture me in light? Of course, light probably will be better versus dark. We'll find out in the full footage. Of course, we'll put a little bit of a LUT to this. We'll put a little classic or the natural LUT to it, which will give you more of that RE vibe to the image, a bit more like greenish skin tone. If you like the Matrix, that kind of look, it's pseudo like that a little bit, I guess. You know, it's up to you guys. Anyway, that's it for this. And let's take a look at some 120p and see what it's like for some epic B-roll. Check this out. All right, guys, that was a little bit of a 120p for you there. Now we're gonna go into Lightroom and take a look at images and see the low light performance and, of course, the overall image quality from the Leica SL2-S. All right, guys, we're now in Lightroom taking a look at images from the SL2-S. Now, the lenses I used were the SL50 Summilux 1.4, the Sigma 65mm f2 contemporary lens, as well as the Sigma 35mm f2 contemporary lens. And we're going to talk about image quality. We'll talk about low light performance, dynamic range, IBIS, and of course, tracking fast-moving subjects. Let's get down to it. Image quality. This is my Rottweiler Praha. This is with the Sigma 65mm lens at f2, ISO 400. This would look like before edit, after edit, before edit, after edit. I'm really happy with this. It's sharp, great bokeh, great separation. This lens paired with this camera is fantastic. Here is a mini waterfall in this stream at Botanical Gardens. And I wanted to test the IBIS on this camera to see if it's as good as the S series from Panasonic, the S5, S1, S1R, S1H, as well as the Leica SL2. And guys, it is 1/4 seconds handheld, 65mm at f2, ISO 200, and we're sharp here, folks. We nailed it. I gotta tell you, really, really happy with that. Very, very impressive. Now, here's some other shots here just in terms of image quality from Marina Bay Sands. This is a restaurant there as well. And for you guys like cars, here's a Ferrari, ISO 4000. Did a little bit of an edit to it, but look at that. Very, very usable. Very happy with that image. Okay, let's talk about low light performance here. Let's go to ISO 10,000 nighttime. This is with the 50 Summilux 1.4 at 1.4, 1/100th of a second. And this is very usable, folks. This has not been edited at all. This is straight out of camera shooting DNG, no processing at all. And this is, you know, once I start editing this in Lightroom, this is a very, very usable image. Even looking at it right now, the grain is really controlled here in the noise. So Leica's done a tremendous job, and this BSI sensor is fantastic. Here's ISO 20,000. Again, 20,000 is a bit on the extreme side. We probably won't ever shoot it at this level that much, but if we need to grab a shot for whatever reason, we're still able to capture some detail here as well. Look at this. And this is quite a distance away from where I was at, and I'm able to get a lot of detail in the buildings. Very happy with it. And if you want to see the grain in the sky, it's still very well controlled being at ISO 20,000. And let's see what else we have here. Here's some other photos here from Marina Bay Sands that evening. This is the Apple Store. If you haven't seen it, this is absolutely amazing to see. Once you guys can travel again, if you're not in Singapore, you got to check this out. This is on another level. Sidetracking a little bit, but it's absolutely beautiful. Now, I want to show you this picture in terms of dynamic range. Now, this is Praha once again. She's always with me on all my photo shoots. And yeah, this picture looks a little bit muddy. You're like, you know, yeah, there's some detail there. The color's a little bit muted. It is what it is. But this is what the original image looked like. This is it. I don't know how it nailed focus because it was almost pitch black, but it nailed focus. It got it sharp, and as a result, we got the tongue, we got the teeth, we got the nose, we can see the eyes. This is very impressive, guys. There's some really good dynamic range in this. And this is at ISO 1000, mind you. It's not ISO 100, where you're always gonna get that optimal dynamic range. This is at ISO 1000, and I'm still able to pull out details like that and not break up the image. I'm really, really impressed. Okay, now let's move on to talk about fast-moving subjects, tracking, and continuous autofocus. Now, here's a few shots that I took. Here's a lady riding a Vespa. Now, I wanted to do that pan shot as well as tracking her because I wanted that blurry background. So this is at 1/100th of a second, 35mm at f7.1 ISO 100. And, you know, I nailed this area. This area is sharp. It blurs out a little bit back here. Again, when you're doing this pan and shoot, this is a technique that takes a lot of practice. I need a little bit more practice, as you can tell, but but the tracking box was sticking right on her. It was not moving, which was very impressive because on the SL2, it was a little bit all over the place. It liked to dance a little bit more than usual. Here's this guy cycling, and again, use the tracking on this. Same settings as the previous image, but this one's much sharper. Look at the details on his helmet. We can see his beard here. We can see the clothing, all very sharp. Really happy with this image in terms of how I was able to capture it. Again, you know, these are sample images just to test the camera's performance overall. I'm not going for any sort of photography exhibition here, folks, but I'm just happy with how it turned out in terms of tracking, because that's the one thing that we always worry about with these contrast-based camera systems is how well can they focus compared to the phase detect systems out there. Now, I do want to highlight something for you. Now, when you go to the fastest speed on this camera in terms of burst mode, you only get single autofocus, and I'll show you what happens in that case. Here's a guy that was cycling around here at Marina Bay Sands, and as he was getting closer to me, the wall was in focus, he's out of focus, but in the EVF, the box was locked on him and it was green. And in the EVF, he was sharp, but it's single autofocus. So you can't always trust the EVF sometimes. You got to look at what the end result is. But that is something to take note of on this camera system. And with any camera out there, they're going to have their strengths and weaknesses. But if you understand the SL2 and SL2S's strengths, you really can get some fantastic images out of it. You can capture sports, you can capture fast action, but you're not going to, of course, get that same performance as you would get out of a 1DX or a Nikon D6 or an A9 II from Sony. Anyway, let's go to my final thoughts on the SL2S. So as you can tell from Lightroom, the low light performance out of these images is really impressive. And I think that's what makes this SL2S a very attractive camera for a lot of people out there, especially those who do shoot in a variety of low light conditions and lighting conditions in general. The SL2S will serve you much better, I think, than the SL2. The SL2 is really for, as I mentioned before in this review, those that need high resolving images. You know, if it's going to be for magazine covers or if you're going to print in very large format sizes, that's where the SL2 is going to come into play. Now, of course, you do have that multi-shot mode where you can get 96 megapixels out of this camera, but everything needs to be still and you have to be on a tripod. So there are some limitations to that. But overall, I think the SL2S is a really attractive camera for the Leica family. But there is the price point that needs to be taken into consideration. I mean, obviously this is coming at a premium, especially when you're coming in at a 24.6 megapixel sensor. There are a lot of other cameras out there that are going to be significantly less than this S variant here, with pretty much almost all the same specs. But you're watching this video because you're a fan of Leica. And when we like Leica, price is secondary, its passion and its build quality and its history and its lineage that comes first. But I will say, on a side note, I do hope that Leica does start partnering more with people like Atomus and DJI, where you can actually utilize the camera's functionalities a lot more. Because I did notice with Atomus, there are no camera profiles or L-log in there. You have to use other log formats and you have to play around with it. I mean, it can be done, but it would be nice that if Atomus and Leica work together like they did with Capture One, and to really combine that to give this camera a little bit more boost in terms of its video capabilities, especially with DJI as well with the Ronin RS2. I was playing around with that, and it would have been nice to have, camera functionality with the Raven Eye a little bit more. But, maybe in time we'll get that, or maybe we won't. But hopefully Leica, you start working with these companies, because I think for a lot of videographers out there, people that want to expand their horizons with the Leica cameras, I think these are tools that we really do need. And with that, those are my thoughts on the SL2S. I like it. It's beautiful. And it's a Leica. So price, secondary, passion, maybe selling a kidney on eBay, that comes first. And with that, guys, be safe, take care, and we'll chat to you soon.